Welcome.
Back to jazz.
Yay, Just English Talk.
Amazing.
Happy to be here.
Me too.
What are we discussing today?
We're talking about drama, but drama as a form, so plays. We could just call it plays, but we normally break these things into prose, verse, and drama. We give it that kind of, it makes us feel smarter when we can call them something that no one else calls them.
Yes.
But we're talking about plays today. The play's the thing that we're talking about today. Bit of Hamlet for you all there. It's probably a good idea to think about where plays or the concept of drama came from originally. So the briefest historical overview is probably ancient Greece. They loved spectacle, and so they had, they would have processions and they would have kind of public violence.
Most interactive theatre.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you may have your head cut off. Yeah,
It's possible.
there'll be lots of public nudity, public music. Like, they loved spectacle, and so naturally drama came about. And it started with kind of masks and lots of singing on the stage and some kind of dance. And they would have choruses, which was where people would be saying things all together in a group, and that would often serve a role of like a narrator. And because of that, it found its way into kind of more narrative performances, and they would just perform these plays. And originally they were just broken into comedy, tragedy, and the pre-satire play, which was just a very weird one with very bawdy tones, and it wasn't really different from it was like tragedy and comedy combined, plus nudity, because people were so excited by the whole performance. So that was a whole thing. But those were the original genres. And if we fast forward a few centuries to Shakespeare, because that's where most people start their journey of looking at plays and drama, historically at least, he did away with the weirdness, because Elizabethan society was slightly more conservative,
Prim and proper.
a little bit more prim and proper, and it was in England, the home of prim and proper, and he decided instead his third genre was going to be history. Okay, so he had his comedies, he had his tragedies, he followed with the Greek tradition, he clearly read his Aristotle, and then ended up with this third genre of history. And I think that might be an interesting place to start. Why, in Elizabethan and Jacobean England, did it feel an important thing for him to do to be talking about the lives of kings and queens? What do we think?
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to do with sort of the political turbulence during the time and trying to establish and show support for the lineage of kings and queens, especially when there was so much question in the public eye as to the validity of some of the claims to the throne, i.e. James I in particular.
Of course.
And because Shakespeare was aligned with kind of big political players like Queen Elizabeth I and James I, he needed to have that as part of his role as being a voice of government connection to the people of all different classes who are coming to see it, and sort of being a vehicle for those political statements.
Totally, it's a kind of propaganda.
In a way, I think definitely.
But why drama? Like why plays? Why is plays the best way to do this?
Yeah, can't you be political and kind of show your affiliation through poetry and prose?
I think you can.
So the way I posed that question was like, you answer that right now. But do you know what I mean? Like, why do we feel like, if you felt that drama and putting these performances would be the best way to do this?
I think partly because this was an age in which lots of people were literate, and they needed to have the people who were less controllable because they were en masse part of these opinions that they wanted to promote, and that it needed to be entertainment and part of the education of territories, because again, a lot of people didn't have the opportunity to get educated.
Yeah.
I think this is part of it.
And it was quite low culture in a lot of ways. To go to the theatre, we think of it now as very high culture.
Yeah.
You know, we have our binoculars on our sticks, and we feel kind of very proud of ourselves for going to those. But it was fairly low culture, certainly for a lot of people, where they were there on the floor, chucking their tomatoes and drinking their beers and having a quick fight in the interval, kind of thing. And so targeting those people, for sure, you have that spectacle element. You bring in those crowds who can't be controlled through reading things, because like you said, they wouldn't necessarily been literate. So I guess the follow-up question would be, what if the purpose is the opposite?
To destabilize and to critique,
Mm.
then
And to go,
I think that's totally fair.
yeah, to follow that that tradition of kind of mirrors for magistrates idea, where you have literature that is designed to show leaders what they should and shouldn't be doing by going, look, here's how badly it can go. And you only need to look at, obviously, lots of the histories and some of the tragedies that have the historical element as well, to go, that didn't go very well for that ruler when they did that insane thing. Maybe you shouldn't do that, because you're in the audience.
Yeah.
You, Elizabeth and James, and obviously other dramatists would have their own relevant figures. They would be there potentially learning something.
Yeah.
Indeed, and if we think about who Shakespeare chose to focus plays on, it wasn't people who were killing it the whole time, metaphorically.
Quite often it was.
And with that mirror to magistrate, I'm thinking of Macbeth and the descendancy of kings. The last king in supposedly the stage directions holding up a mirror to who's in the audience, King James I.
Yeah.
Reflect if this is going to be you, and if your power is going to go to your head, thus destroy you.
Yeah.
Which it
It's
seemed.
it's the safety of the stage, right? So they're putting these on because it allowed people to safely critique in ways that you could.
It's plausible deniability.
It's like, oh, it's just a play, it's just a
It's not about you.
Yeah, it's just but and that's like a very popular way of providing critique, right?
Yeah.
Is
Particularly in
they-
societies where you can't be direct.
Yeah, you need some kind of separation of these things in order to get away with saying things that in day-to-day life you probably wouldn't be able to just stand right square and say, publicly. But because you have you're in costume and there's and then
A lot of metaphor.
Yeah, exactly. And plays within plays and all of these kind of little things.
Well, this is really relevant though, isn't it? Because if you think about Hamlet, Shakespeare essentially says that he's doing exactly that, where Hamlet puts on a play within the play of Hamlet, where he essentially exposes the bad behavior of the current ruler by reenacting an supposed murder of the previous king. Like he's essentially going, look, what I'm doing with my drama is showing the audience.
Do you think he was like
the play's the thing?
Excited
Yeah.
when he was
I
like,
think
wait
so.
a minute, if I put the play in the play,
It's another lens.
that's another
Exactly.
It's not me, but it's actually Amber or whoever it might be. Like it's actually their play. It's not my play,
No.
right? So it's like this.
I think it was fun.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a fun and of course we can't shy away from coming. Let's jump back a moment to the Greeks and this spectacle and this. Like we as human beings enjoy watching other human beings do things, right? Like playing instruments or performing or acting in unison and dancing and all this. Like there's an entertainment element.
Yeah.
And maybe you can see all of this political in infiltration as a corruption of just the pure joy of just like, oh, let's get together and like put on a little play, let's have a bit of fun with it.
Yeah.
I suppose that over time, what people realize is that this form can be far more powerful than just a few mates getting together, drinking some beers and pretending to be an angel or whoever it might be, right? It's like we can actually use this.
Because literature is inherently political.
Yeah. And then, once it gets written down, and you can give it to other people, to perform and to go off and do this here and there and everywhere, or take it and reimagine it and recreate it again, Shakespeare's such a good example of this, that these plays that he's written have never really gone out of style.
And we can still see in the productions in the last century how much of that original play can be used to talk about current events,
Yeah,
even though Shakespeare wasn't there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when you see Macbeth in modern day fatigues, or sort of Ian McKellen's Hamlet was on an exercise bike, and sort of in order to show that mindset that he's in, it is talking about our time as well. And
For sure. And you can't really do that with poetry.
No.
Obviously, our last podcast.
Or with prose.
Quite so much with prose
Yeah.
now. I mean, obviously, like you can have adaptations of a novel into like films and shows, but never with the same diversity and obligation to perform that you have
you
with
never
poetry.
very rarely see it in the opposite direction. You very rarely see people novelizing. You know, whatever. Like as in, like it's always generally. Like, let's take a poem. Yeah, it's dramatized, right? It's put on off onto a screen or onto a stage, because I guess what people feel like is that is the still maybe our most powerful way of you know,
because you can do so much with it, with the performance element, and that I think that might be a nice segue into talking about the fact that plays were certainly originally never written to be read. They were written to be performed. They were written to be interpreted by directors and the actors who staged them. Indeed, like, you know, when Shakespeare was first writing, and any quartos of his that got published would not have his name on. They would just have the name of the play, and sometimes they would have, like, you know, the King's Men or the Chamberlain's Men, like his play company, because that's where the focus was. It was on the performance of this thing. It wasn't until much later where people started putting Shakespeare in bigger font, like the first folio in
it didn't matter about him.
1623.
It mattered about the
Exactly, and because it's all about performance. So, like, how does that change the way that we approach texts in a classroom, drama texts in a classroom, when we are just reading them? We're reading them in the class, and maybe we'll do a read around, and maybe we'll watch a performance of it, and maybe we'll go, if we're very lucky, we'll go to the theatre and see a version of it. But most of the time we are reading it. Knowing that it's designed for performance, what does that do to the way that we approach texts, drama texts in the classroom? How does that change things?
Yeah. I mean, it's not ideal. When I was back in schools I'd always, with the lower year groups, when it came to Shakespeare, we'd just put productions on. You know, because I always felt like, you know, that classic thing, like kids get to year 10, year 11, they're like, oh, Shakespeare. And it's usually because that they've had some kind of negative experience lower down in school, because usually they've just been made to sit there and read it, right? Or it's been read to them.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not in business of sort of knocking how different schools do their approaches, but my feeling was always like, no, if you want them to love it, you've got to bring it alive. And how do you bring it alive? You get them to do it, get them to stand up, get them to read it, get them to, you know, actually put it on, dress up, do all the stuff that people would have done, should be doing.
Yeah.
We'll come on to, I'm sure, like later plays, Inspector Calls, for example, where possibly there's more of a, like, you could just read this element. You've got these long stage directions, you've got this kind of stuff, and the ability for them to be read was much more possible.
I wonder if that's something to do with the proliferation of novels and sort of text in that time compared to Shakespeare's time, and whether playwrights like Priestley were aware that they would be in books and read much more often than they were.
Yeah, because I suppose
Certainly aware of it,
by that point you've moved into the, what would you call it? Basically, like, you know, if you want to put a play on, it's going to cost some money. You need a playhouse. You need somewhere to do it. You know, it's, you know, if you want people to see Inspector Calls, there's a formal thing now. There's the West End. There's like a whole industry that surrounds it. Sure. If you want it to reach as many people as possible in a short space of time, you're not going to probably achieve that through just having it performed, right? You're going to need to shrink it up into books and get it out there. Yeah. Right?
Totally true. Because of saturation of the market as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's more plays, more people are playwrights, and all this kind of stuff is a little bit more, and people have more options for entertainment. you know, so it's not just the whole like, oh well, there's the playhouse and we'll go down there. And,
That is the centerpiece of our
of our
locale.
Yeah, the tube station.
yeah, exactly.
Go down.
Now you got radio, and eventually you have TV and cinema, and all of these things are there, grabbing people's attention. You know, so how do you get there as quickly as possible?
It's very bad.
But to return to your original question about whether they should be read or performed, I mean, they have to at some point. You either have to see it or perform it. That's my feeling.
Yeah, and the textual history, I think, if we take Shakespeare as an example, like just textual history, the earliest manuscripts that you can find that we assume are in Shakespeare's hand, although we can never kind of confirm it, no stage directions, very little in the way of punctuation. Quite often the things that were remaining were kind of, I think they call them like cue books, which were, you would just have one person's lines and the cue, as in the previous speaker, so they would know when to have theirs. So the physical extant text was all about performance. Like, it was just, you're not supposed to kind of read this and be able to kind of understand it. This is just it's like a tool for performance. So you have just the words in there that you need to say, and everything that you do with them is supplementary to that.
And so what has survived in our understanding is the stuff that was performed the most and the best, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Remembered the best.
Yeah. And so in the centuries that followed, you had different editors who would be adding different things. So in like during the Restoration, there was a huge amount of emphasis on putting in standard English spellings, and in putting in loads of punctuation, sometimes quite zany punctuation, like almost over the top. Stage directions came, like, I think, like kind of 18th century, most of them, and all of these editions that we've got that we read now are a million miles away from these kind of scrappy playbooks that were just designed to be on the side of the stage to give people their cues. And so inevitably that's happened because we're studying them more, right? And we want all of this kind of rich detail. I mean, we could ask a separate question about authorship, where we go, well, if Shakespeare didn't write any of these stage directions, and Shakespeare didn't put the punctuation there, Shakespeare didn't spell it like that, did he even mean that word? You can have that conversation separately, but it's kind of irrelevant, because that's the playtext we have in front of us, right?
And also as well, like, would we still have them if someone hadn't done those things? There is an element of like, you're dealing with a very fragile thing, right? It's like, you know, that it was just as likely that we don't have any of these plays as we do, you know, because through the various, you know, fires and just things getting lost, you know, people are forgetful, they misplace it gets blown into the sea. Yeah, exactly. You know, that kind of thing. And like, and so it's actually a miracle in many ways that we have so many, and we have so many incredible plays that have gone on to, you know, pretty much, you know, any modern play that you read will at some point you'll trace it back and you'll get there.
Yeah.
So I think the whole like editorship question and conversation is, like, in many ways we should be thankful that people took the time to bring them up to date, to make them more accessible, because otherwise they don't exist.
Right. And I think if we go back far enough, it's because I think questions of authorship always surround Shakespeare in a way they don't with other people. If we're going back further and further to drama, back to the Odyssey or something, and the earliest dramatic form, which was reciting, then no one's having that same argument about Homer. Yeah. So it is interesting that we sort of circle that on Shakespeare in a way that we don't, when I think part of plays in general is their self-consciousness, maybe, but also self-awareness that they are meant to be acted and meant to be interpreted. That's what a stage direction kind of is, as well as a suggestion.
And especially, sorry, with Homer, it's like, how many translations of Homer are there? You know, like, whenever you pick one up in one bookshop and go to, you know, if you're in a charity shop looking for the Odyssey, you can end up with like 15 different Odysseys by the time you get home.
Oh, totally, yeah.
In each one.
Yeah.
But no one's going, oh, but is it the Odyssey?
Is this the authoritative translation?
You know, and every single few years, there's, you know, Penguin, whoever, make another load of money because they say, oh, no, now this is the authoritative.
This is authoritative,
right?
yeah.
So yeah, people kind of hold like that's why I'm always a bit delicate with like introducing the whole like the authorship question with Shakespeare, because it's like as soon as they hear that like whatever it was, Romeo and Juliet, Othello, they're all based on like other stories or other tales, they get really funny like, oh, so he didn't even write them.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
Set the Tempest, famously.
yeah, right.
His own idea.
Yeah.
Awful. Just stick to adapting things.
Precise, yeah. So it's kind of like, what are you looking for? Are you really just looking to nail down authorship, or I think most people just want to lay that to the side and just focus on what we have.
Well, that's and authorship as a question, like this idea of author equals authority, was that was a romantic idea with their like obsession with the self. So we're looking like late 18th, early 19th century that actually became important to people.
Because I was thinking that earlier, I was going to say, but it sort of went out my mind when you were talking about like Shakespeare. His name wasn't even on the plays. I know. So then I had a thought. Like, so when did the cult of Shakespeare emerge? Like, when did it become really important that he had written these things?
Yeah, and it's a really interesting one, and I think it was very, very little of it was during his lifetime.
Yeah.
Sort of the pre-Raphaelite, wanting to go back to the golden age of Shakespeare.
Exactly, and you like a lot of the kind of the reviews of Shakespeare from other dramatists and other kind of critics were, if they mentioned him, they'd be like, oh, honey-tongued Shakespeare, which sounds like a compliment, but it's like this idea that he was a verbalist, as in he was like, it was just too flowery, his language, and they thought that it was damn verbalist. And he was like that was an accusation of verbalism rather than a compliment to his beautiful language that we would see it as now. And so like he gained fame as things went on, where they were going, actually everything coming out of this playhouse, everything coming from this company that has been patronized by the king is incredibly good. Where did these ideas come from? And they started to think about Shakespeare as being this kind of central genius, but that was such an unusual concept at the time, because
like
he was just
the cult of the cult of the individual, and that's a very modern concept, right? The way that we revere like one person.
Yeah.
It was I guess much harder for that to be a thing in hundreds of years ago.
And people had to try and do it.
Yeah, most people were just kind of born, lived a little bit, and then just
just
of some preventable disease. So no, people didn't have these illusions of like, I can go out and change the world.
Yeah,
if I can just get some.
But some people did, but they were individuals. It was never on this like large scale where like all authors would like. If you go into a bookshop now and you'll see like the author title is much bigger than the book title quite often, and it fills the whole spine.
Particularly with the classics.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, but you did have individual like Ben Jonson, for example, like a contemporary of Shakespeare's. He was very interested in this idea of kind of like making himself a celebrity and kind of putting his name on his plays and all that kind of stuff. But Shakespeare just wasn't as interested in it. And like his name didn't start regularly appearing on his plays until like 1623, first folio, after he died.
And that was a tribute to him by his friends.
Exactly, yeah. Hemmings and Condor?
I think so.
Yeah. And so like this kind of, it was very much, like I think that word you used, like cult of Shakespeare was very much kind of retrospective, not about him kind of trying to claim ownership, because he cared about the drama, about the performance, right?
And I think he would be frustrated with what you said about looking at the bookshop titles and the authors being important. He would say, do what you want. It's the play. It's flexible.
Yeah,
and
it's cultural material.
Yeah.
Particularly as he was so political with his plays, as we mentioned earlier. So like you take my work and you make it do good things. Like you put it in its new vehicle and you transport it, and you criticize your own power systems, and you kind of bring it up to date, because that's what drama should do, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of that in because we have it written, and when people make the decisions of putting it on stage, there is a lot of space to do that because of the way it's been written, and you can interpret. So I've been thinking for the last couple of minutes about that version of An Inspector Calls where the house collapses on stage at the end.
I haven't seen that one.
No, I haven't either. I've heard of that.
I think it was maybe in the 70s or something, and they, after the inspector leaves and the phone rings again, the house on stage collapses, and no words are said, no words need to be said, but it adds so much to your understanding of the cyclicality of that play and the fire and blood and anguish that's going to occur and reoccur if that cycle isn't broken. Especially in the context of, I think, what it was, the 70s. That's really the tension of that moment is bubble burst and house explode energy.
For sure. Yeah.
So I mean, and that's not in the stage direction.
It's not.
No, so it's kind of like, what function do the stage directions serve? Because if you think about those, like, I mean, my feeling is it's a little bit of an attempt at control, possibly from authors, where
Writer's intentions.
they're trying to impress not just the words but like the visuals, right? Because they're these very personal and tender projects, but more often than not, people who are directing these, they kind of just that's thanks. I don't need I need the words. I don't need the directions as much, unless you're going to be like, I'm just going to do a pure version of this, right? Like,
Which nobody does,
right.
because how would you market that?
Right.
Yeah, and with those more malleable plays, like, you can just kind of disregard that. So why even make a big deal of them? I guess.
I suppose really, when you were saying this, I was thinking about back to the novel. All of that stage direction would be the other paragraphs around
The dialogue.
So they're like frustrated novelists.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Writing a novel is like quite. I mean, writing a play is hard too, but writing a novel is kind of like, you've got to do
All of the jobs.
All that's said and all that is unsaid.
Yeah, precisely. Whereas with the play, you just got to write down what the characters say, and then you can do like a paragraph of like, well, in this corner we'll have this. But by and large, you can leave.
But this is the crux, I think, when it comes to like the student experience of drama, is how is it differentiated from prose, and particularly from novels as the most obvious kind of parallel. And it is the limitations. It has to be the limitations. Like, you are given a huge amount of freedom with kind of the performance, but in terms of the words that you're allowed to use, like, it's so much more limited. Like, you can drop in the odd parenthetical like adverb of how a line is to be delivered, and you can have lengthy stage directions, but most people just be like, oh, just get to the money kind of thing. And the biggest one is insight into your characters. So if you have, say, an omniscient narrator in a novel, or you even have first person narration in a novel, you get insight into the characters' minds. How do you do that on the stage?
Well, you have to rely on the actors, don't you? Which is something we haven't really spoken much about, like how then the acting side of it comes into it.
Well, the one thing you can put in is soliloquy, right? You can drop in a soliloquy, but that's very much...
You were talking about more actually the thoughts of the characters. Right. I thought you meant like, as in like the... when you write a line, I love you, darling. Different actors will interpret that in different ways, right? You're kind of lending the words to whoever decides to put it on, right? And you're letting the... Whereas in a novel, you might describe, they said it this way with their eyes this way, Don't put that in. That would, because I don't think any actor would probably want to get a script, and it's like not just the words, but like before each line, it's
fluttering of your eyelids.
Do it this way. You're kind of letting a little bit more go, aren't you?
And drama students will know that, because they have to make those decisions and write them as part of their exam of, this is how I would present this line. But then you have that sort of flexibility of that, I love you, darling. I love you, darling. You can to audience. Right.
Emphasis
So much
where,
there.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
And so much of that isn't determined by the play itself.
And it just can't be given. And so for students looking at a play text, they will go, what is going on in this character's head, and unless they tell me with a soliloquy, or unless it's revealed in the stage directions in these very contrived ways of trying to compensate for the limitations of a play, because like that's where things like soliloquy and stage directions come from. It is our frustration, like the frustrated novelist who is now a playwright, who can't add all of this kind of showing your hand and kind of revealing things.
Which is why I think there's so much of that in something like Hamlet, where it's all about the inside of his head and what he's thinking. So that's why it's mostly soliloquy.
Yeah,
and he's
it's
talking
very
so
soliloquy
much.
heady. Yeah. And so it's a really interesting one to, like, the biggest question kind of to ask yourself as a student looking at drama is, what would this look like as a novel? What extra stuff would be in there if it were a novel? And what would be gained and what would be lost with us being force-fed? This is how you're supposed to think about this. This is the extra stuff that's going on. As compared to here it is in its most sparse form of just the language used and a few kind of details, and everything else is the way you interpret it, either as someone reading it, if it's this kind of closet drama, or indeed for a director and the actors and the people involved in the stagecraft
Like
when they're putting on a performance. Yeah, exactly. That line, there's so much you can do with that.
Yeah, because how do you want to pitch it?
Yeah.
It's and actually it's probably a good thing to finish on that with students and drama. Yeah, write about. You've got more to write about in some way, because it's not saying that they're saying
To be this
yeah, it's not saying like that he's saying it in a sad way, or he's saying it in an angry way, or saying it's like you tell me what you think, kind of thing, which in a novel you probably wouldn't get as much of, because it might be a little bit more explicit. Yeah.
And that actually helps students out, because that adds so much nuance to their writing when they can say, well, he could be completely nihilistic here, or he could be relieved.
Yeah.
And
And some evidence for this interpretation comes from where he delivered this line elsewhere, and like it allows you to build up this picture where you're the less evidence you have, the more thinking you have to do, and the more thinking you do, the more you're demonstrating to an examiner how good you are at literature. Pretty cool.
Nice.
Nice.
Thanks for listening, and we'll be back with some prose conversation.
Nice.